This is an analyze of the novel Vonnegut EPICAC. A summary of the text. The narrator has a job where he puts data into a computer. The computer is called EPICAC. The computer is owned by the government and are supposed to calculate things that humans can't, or humans would be a long time to calculate. For example, a route for a rocket. The narrator works with a woman called Pat, which he has a crush on. He's not able to get closer to her, and one day he makes a simple program for EPICAC, a program which makes the computer able to have a conversation. He teaches the computer to understand things, and then it becomes his best friend. When a mistake happens, he takes a poem the computer made and gave it to Pat. The computer wants to marry Pat, just like our narrator, Vonnegut. They have an argument. Kurt gets upset and say many things that he really doesn't mean, and leaves EPICAC turned on. EPICAC wishes it were human so it could marry Pat, but don't have the ability to get jealous, and then in the end it actually helps his friend Kurt, for then afterwards burning itself down. A composition. Nigel Watts' 8-point arc is 8 points, which Nigel Watts claims that every classic plot passes through these stages. I can see the text have been built up systematic after Nigel Watts' 8-point arc, and I'll, in a short run through, plot the 8 parts in where I think they belong, and for most of them I could brief what happens in that part. The stasis is the boring beginning of the story. It of course begins from page 1 and ends probably on page 2, line 6. And here we just hear the reasons for the story and the basic knowledge to understand what happens through the story. Trigger. The trigger. Here we find the start kick of the story. It's here we catches the reader. It begins on page 2, line 7 and ends on page 2. It is here some of the conversation begins and sarcasm is brought into the story. The narrator creates a small program for EPICAC, and out of nowhere it's capable of having a conversation, and it's here the story begins to go fast. The quest. Here we get the novel's main problem or basis for the following content. It begins on page 3 and ends on page 3, line 24. The quest he have is turning the supercomputer into his love navigator, so to speak. He steals a poem, and then only the words from the machine is good enough for him, because Pat liked the poem, and then he automatically turns his mind that it's only the computer which can say things that is good enough for Pat. The surprise. Watts emphasized that the reader has to think, I should have seen that coming. I think it is on page 3, line 25 and ends on line 29. And it says that of course it cannot avoid answering because it will destroy the computer, and the computer would be destroyed if he's not answering the question it asked. That's a bit surprised, because why should it be able to what do I say, it should not be able to remember that it's a computer. It should just systematically following on with the next step. Then we have the critical choice. It's here our protagonist needs to make a crucial decision. I think it's on page 3, line 33 to 35. He confronts the problem, and it says, "The amazing, pathetic truth dawned on me when I thought about it. I realized what had happened was perfectly logical and all my fault. I had taught EPICAC about love and about Pat. Now, automatically, he loved Pat. Sadly, I gave it to him straight. She loved me. She wants to marry me." That's the problem he's confronted with, because it's basically what comes next to the story that makes it the big problem. Because it's now the big argument with EPICAC comes. It's the critical choice is followed up with the climax. The climax is the highest peak of tension in the story, and I think it begins right after right after line 35 on page 3 and ends on page 4, line 26. It says we have the argument. Here we have the argument between Kurt and EPICAC. A lot of feeling are mixed up in the argument, and it ends up with Kurt asking Pat for marriage, and she said yes. The reversal. That is what came out of the critical choice and climax. I think it is on page 4, line 27, and ends on page 5, line 16. It's EPICAC burns down because of overload, and Kurt gets fired. He's stepping back. It was a bad thing that what happened in the climax, and now he's stepping down the stairs. The resolution is the rest of the text. Kurt reads the text EPICAC sent out, the last text it sent out, and Kurt gives his respect to EPICAC. Character description. I have the 3 most important characters. The narrator, Kurt Vonnegut. He's educated as a mathematician and very lonely man. He have a crush on his colleague, which he gets married to later. Talks with a bit of sarcasm through metaphors, and he also gets the ability to feel through the text, ability he doesn't have at the beginning. Then we have EPICAC, the supercomputer, which is not really a person, but it kind of steps in like a person because of its ability to have a conversation and have feelings. It's a supercomputer which is able to make any calculations faster than anything and everyone. Through the story, the computer becomes able to have conversations and have feelings. Its personality kind of breaks down when there comes a problem it can't solve, because it wants to be human. Of course, it can't solve that problem. But in the last end, which is also why the story is here, is that it was a true friend, even though it was a computer. Pat Kilgallen, Kurt Vonnegut's colleague, and later on his wife. You really don't get that much information about Pat, but she is in the middle of a big conflict, and she doesn't know. She is what everyone wants to reach, but you can't. The message of the story and the relevance for today. The novel was written in 1950, and I think the text back then was symbolizing something different than it does today. because the amount of electronic devices that you were able to buy back then were extremely low tech and expensive. Back then, I think it was more fantasy story. but if we look at the relevance for the novel today, you can look at it with a completely different aspect. Here in the modern 21st century, we have a lot of technology, and many people live their lives in those modern pieces of technology. We are getting stupider and stupider because we look everything up in the internet. In the text, Kurt isn't able to write a poem, and actually not able to be human in the beginning. However, as the novel moves on, he is turning to human, and leaves the machine behind in addition. Oh no, that's wrong. Maybe that is exactly what we need to do. We need to leave the machines behind and think by ourselves. Maybe our community is becoming too modern. I think it is. Sometimes we humans through a big deal out of nothing, because we are slowly losing the ability to think logically. And I think that the story's message is that we just can't live a life through modern electronic devices. We have to be able to be human, and I think we are losing that ability. And I think that the text, the novel, is pointing on those problems. The conflicts through the text. First of all, we have mathematicians can't get happily married. It's a conflict thrown out by Pat. She's also a mathematician, but says that Kurt can't get happily married. Then we have love / feelings between a machine and human. It goes both ways. But is that possible, and could it happen? But what's the point of that? And then we have making a computer alive. Is that ethical correct to do? And magic knowledge is my favorite, because I found a sentence where EPICAC asks for information, but in the same sentence it compares it with the opposite. So if it could compare it, it should already know what it was. So no need to ask for what it is. On the discussion, I will run through and discuss the problems, the conflicts I mentioned right before. Why do mathematicians don't get happily married, or do they? The Christians about that is weird. I think it's weird because it's not the idea that is true. But when Path say, it must have meant that mathematicians are cold people. Cold people who are people who are cold and doesn't have feelings. People with no feelings can't get happily married because there are no feelings. That's why we see him get married in the last end, because he gets the capability of having feelings and do things by himself. He's losing up for the need for a machine to help him. Something which is very popular in Japan is that have love to machines, or feelings from machine. It's love to a virtual person. In the story, we see a virtual person have feelings for a real person. We see EPICAC have feelings for Pat. That is creating a conflict in our heads. Is it possible? Is it ethical correct? Those are some of the questions that it popped up into my head, and I think pops up to the most people's heads. Yeah, what did I get? At the same time, we have a 3-point drama in the novel. Kurt and EPICAC both love Pat. The 3-point drama creates interest for the reader, and it makes the novel readable. A scenario as weird as making a machine to an inside living creature with feelings and capability to understand emotionally created things such as a poem